Hi, hello, and welcome to today's edition of Caddy's Corner. Just wanted you to know that I live right by this mural if you ever coming to Bed-Stuy, and apparently, whatever Hollyhock is, they're filming in the neighborhood. Got one arm filled with a bunch of groceries. I got some chicken and some yams. Turns out I like mashed sweet potatoes, and it's an easy grab to add to a meal. So I'm going to make some of that ahead of Thanksgiving. So I'm out in Bed-Stuy at noon because the case settled. So I'm now free to openly discuss what it was about and what happened. There is a young man, Mr. O'Connor, who was double parked in front of a bodega in the Rockaways. An officer in an unmarked car who was actually going off shift, heading with his dinner back to his precinct, apparently pulled up behind the plaintiff, Mr. O'Connor. I've been speaking in code about this thing and not revealing any details for so many days now. It's weird to be able to openly talk about it. Apparently he was eating General Tso's chicken, was on the passenger seat of the car. He was a solo. I can't even hear myself think between the bus, the truck, and the truck. Okay. So he got out and decided to write him a parking, double parking summons. Seems that the kid asked what's happening. The guy said, "I'm tired of waiting for you," possibly an expletive used, we're not sure. And so the kid drove across the street and pulled over and got out of the car to talk to him about, like he wasn't really double parked. Unfortunately in the city too often people think if I'm still in the car, I'm just standing, except the legal nature of the law is that if you are beside another vehicle and in a lane of traffic, you are technically double parked. Learned that one the hard way myself. Anyway, Officer Kwan got out of the car and was having a shoving match with O'Connor when two on-duty officers who were in a marked car witnessed what was happening, saw it as a 1085, which is a, assault on an officer in trouble or whatever it's called. I'm sorry, it's been a long time since I worked at the mall and used my 10 codes. So they rushed over to help and ended up beating the bejesus out of Mr. O'Connor. And definitely sprayed him in the face with pepper spray. That wasn't even the argument, is that his head and back were slammed into the vehicle. He was slammed to the ground. His face was stepped on. Allegedly, we don't know really, there's no video, so we don't know what happened. But they did lift him up by his arms, which were handcuffed behind him from the ground. And it tore both, he had tears in both supraspinatus rotator cuffs, which is where they believe birth defect injury lives, so I know what that pain is. They settled. Did get an opportunity to talk to both sets of lawyers about the case and what we witnessed as far as them as lawyers and what the witnesses were saying and what was confusing. It was interesting to me. The question marks that the other jurors, which we all kind of talked about a little bit ahead of just speaking with the lawyers a little bit, what their opinion of the case was. It was I would say it was very different than mine because having served on the criminal jury before, I kind of knew the pomp and circumstance of the courtroom and what to ignore, that they were trying to lead us to focus on certain things. But I'll say this. The question mark of de-escalation came up a lot. And I'll also, let me preface all of this by saying that, my ex was a cop. He was a corrections officer at Rahway, which is a maximum security prison. I've just hit my steps and putting these back down. Being a pack mule shopper in Brooklyn is not always easy. So we had the philosophical discussion about as soon as a suspect makes action at a cop, especially getting out of a car during a stop, that can be constituted as a danger to a cop. So they actually can respond with force, and sometimes should have more quickly, or they got hurt. But the flip side of that is that we're all human, and it was revealed during the information we got during this case that Officer Kwan had been undiagnosed at that point with diabetes. So here's this man by himself on the end of his shift picking up his General Tso's chicken, stopped at what he thought was a red light because the deli was right on the corner. And then he's kind of munching away on his food and then realizes it's been 2 or 3 turns of the light and he hasn't gone anywhere. And unlike me, who would just then lay on the horn and be like, he didn't put his hazards on, but O'Connor was young. He was 26. In fact, he didn't even have his full license. He only had his learner's permit. So yeah, he messed up. He messed up a lot. He shouldn't have gotten out of the car. He shouldn't have moved the car. He should have just gone, thank you, officer, and taken the $100 ticket. He borrowed someone else's car. It wasn't even his car. What was a little shocking is that the whole incident, according to the paperwork on all 3 cops' accounts, was that the initial incident happened at 9:06, and by like 9:12 in p.m. on an August night in 2013, Mr. O'Connor was handcuffed and in the back of the other car. So like the whole thing went down in 6 minutes. 6 minutes from him walking up to the side of the car, and then them, they will say that they just contained the suspect, who was then, the minute that he got out of the car, Officer Kwan decided to place him under arrest. So everything after that was a resisting arrest. I've met a lot of cops in New York. I have witnessed a lot of cops' behavior in New York. I have double parked cars more times than I probably parallel parked cars in this town, because that is part of the ether of living in this town. Some cops have come up to me while I was double parked. I feel like I might have gotten 1 ticket that way, to which I shrugged my shoulders and said, well, don't do that again. But that's one reason why whenever you do double park a car, you want to have a person sitting in the car, not on their phone, not actively doing anything else, and always put your hazards on. And if someone comes up behind you, check and see if it's a cop, and if it's marked or unmarked, drive around the block. That's why the person sitting in that seat needs to have a driver's license and needs to be able to know to go. So it's certainly reasonable that he could have gotten a ticket. It's certainly reasonable that Officer Kwan, who had him by like 6 inches and 20 pounds, was, feeling danger and being attacked because this young man got out of his car. Again, not the middle of the night. It was summertime, so the sun was just setting. A lot of it wasn't clear. Well, I don't know where I was at in talking about this. And my neighbors came out and I was chatting with them for a minute, so I just paused. Obviously, different background. It was a very sad thing to sit through, the testimony. Mostly what was the most frustrating is that it was obviously apparent that a blue wall had gone up, and those 3 cops were either adamantly lying, it was just another beating to them so they didn't care, and just made up answers. They were very aggressive on the stand and very nervous and very uncooperative, even to the court clerk, the judge. I don't know how many other people they've done this to. And the fact that it was over double parking to run into a deli and get some water or whatever. It doesn't matter why he went to the deli. I don't care what he was buying. De-escalation. I'm learning to do it more and more in my own life. In personal situations, it's very important. Oftentimes when someone else is riled, they get you riled, and then it's just a big ball of riled. And as a bartender, I've told stories sometimes at the bar of things that have gone down, and other people have said, well, you threw them out, right? Or you called the cops, right? Or you blah, 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 right? And I've gone, no. Actually, with kindness and compassion, I lowered my voice, and I did whatever I did in any particular circumstances. The people at 86th are usually not the ones that are capping off with verbal problems or physical, never hands on me, but hands on somebody in the bar. De-escalation is important. And if the NYPD doesn't learn to train their officers that their safety is the first priority, of course. Nobody wants cops to be stepping into dangerous situations. But their judgment must be clear to be peace officers first and try to de-escalate. At least try. At least try. So not only did not Officer Kwan did not attempt to de-escalate, he went right for the jugular. I mean that metaphorically. And then the other two officers, Fitzsimmons and Delgado, they didn't attempt to de-escalate Kwan and O'Connor. They saw an officer in trouble and they responded. Appropriately or not, I don't know. That one's up for question mark. Again, there's no video. We just heard people's testimony, and those officers all said completely different things, to the extent that Officer Kwan was in an unmarked car, not an unmarked car. They parked on the left side of the street. They swung their car as a U-turn right behind the vehicle. Again, the whole thing took place in 6 minutes, and I wouldn't expect even O'Connor to have a good recollection of it, because he was just in the car hanging out at the deli, and then poof, he's on the floor with his arms being chicken winged up behind him, being arrested. It's like, what? I was literally just sitting in the car. What's happening? I did get the sense from his testimony that he wasn't a con artist and it wasn't ambulance chasing, that this event was a fork in his life, and that he was scared of the cops, always, because he was a young black man in Brooklyn. And not for nothing, the NYPD does not have a great record of not picking on certain people. So, I don't know if I'm relieved that it's settled. I don't know what the jury would have agreed upon. I know how I felt. I told the lawyers as much. I think that the blue wall of the NYPD, which I have seen in action multiple times since 1993, and it's beautiful if you want to be protected and you're behind the blue wall, and it's terrible if you land on the outside of the blue wall. And there's not one or two cases of it. There's not. There's a lot. So I'm going to post this. It's my opinion. I want to thank every NYPD officer who is serving and who has ever served for their time of service to the city. You matter and you are important, and thank you for all of the help that you have ever given me, which I would like to say I'm very, very lucky that 90+% of the cops I have come in contact with for a multitude of reasons, sometimes just standing on the same street corner, and specifically the one who helped me on 9/11. I will never forget you and what you lost that day. So there is no judgment. I don't know what was really going on with these three officers. I do think that it was blood sugar related. The fact that he lost his temper, but you lost your temper. So, settlement's done. My jury duty's done. I'm going to go upstairs, cook some food, take a nap, and go bartend at Commonwealth tonight. But at least I have a little bit of breathing room back in my life. This was a very enlightening experience. There's a lot to process from it. It was a little overwhelming. It was like having to watch all of the unedited version of what was to become a half-hour Law and Order episode, except we got the, I don't even know, 64-hour versions of tape. It was a lot. Got to see the inside of the justice system again, and boy, buddy, is that thing broken in a lot of different ways. So, good luck to you, Mr. O'Connor. I wish you all the blessings for your health and recovery. I hope that you can straighten out and fly right. Use the circumstances that you've gone through to propel you energetically to help other people solve and resolve. To the officers involved in this case, I hope you learn some better de-escalation techniques. Treat people with a little bit more compassion and kindness. That's all. So my hope for today is that everyone is safe, everyone is well, everyone is recovering. And let's all keep having philosophical discussions about what we think is right and wrong, and not just wait for big cases to come flying by. Let's keep volunteering our time, effort, and energy into helping heal and resolve and reclaim little pieces of justice where we can. It doesn't always happen in the courtroom. It means it just happened on the street. So, that's it for today. I'm sure we'll do it again tomorrow. Thanks for joining me in Cafe Land. Bye.